Well, hello, creatives, community, kind folks, and I have to add into this, classmates and collegiates. Hello there. This is RPG with DBJ. I am your host, DBJ. Um, Along with going live on YouTube, we are also doing a live audio through Fantasy Grounds College. Um, if you're unsure where that is or how to get yourself into the Discord, all that information is listed below in this video, especially if you just want to listen in as opposed to watching on YouTube. I will be posting the link in the chat as we speak. Now, just to let you guys know, to give you an update, if you are unfamiliar with the process of how this channel works, each week we pick a theme, and that theme could be any number of things. We do it all week, Monday through Friday. And this theme's week is the Underdark and Subterranean adventures in our tabletop RPG games. And each day we take that theme and subdivide it into a particular subject, such as Monster Monday, Tips and Tricks Tuesday, World Building Wednesday, which is today, Third Pillar Thursday. That's kind of my favorite, my passion. We'll discuss that a little bit later. And Future Friday, where we talk about modern day all the way into science fiction and the far future. Now, because we will both be using the chat in YouTube and talking to people over in Fantasy Grounds College in the Discord, please be aware that I may not be able to get to every single comment, and we try our best to remain focused on what we're talking about, which today would be world building in our subterranean realms. So if you really want to have your comment pop out, please begin it with DBJ. Sure, you could put in Dread if you want like that, but DBJ is real simple. Don't even have to capitalize it. Just put in DBJ. It'll pop up. I will try to get to your comment as soon as possible. I understand there's a limitation on how much information you can partake. So send across to those of us that are also taking part in these conversations. So I will try to unfurl the comments that you say, and let's have some fun. All right, so as usual, because each day we try to pick like a different part of it, but it always blends over. We were doing some world building, of course, Monday and yesterday and such, about subterranean realms and worlds and such. And we also know that the Underdark, trademarked by WotC and Forgotten Realms, we understand that we already have a great basis for empires and evil baddies and things like that in our subterranean realms. But I think sometimes keeping it a little bit simple or finding simple things to pull on, we can really start to bring together a far greater immersion into our worlds, just so that when your PCs start traveling in your world, they can it can be very unique for your own gaming experience and for the people at your table, so that they always come across, essentially one more thing that makes their experience at your table different than what they would maybe read in a book or a setting or something of that nature. Yeah, Fat Ninja's DM says, working on an adventure for some in real life friends. Really excited. Cool. Now, when it comes to world building, one of the things that we sometimes, I don't want to say ignore, but it's not the most exciting thing, are some of the mundane realities of living in these worlds. And some of the mundane parts of living in the world has to do with travel, food, shelter, economics, money exchanging, barter systems, essentially, and dealing with the locale, whether it's weather or living in a location that's very difficult to get to, or subject to seasonal or environmental changes such as hot and cold and things of that nature. And those things extend into the subterranean realm as much as we would like them to extend there. On the Discord channel for RPG with DBJ, it kind of half jokingly talked about the idea of a giant geode, you know, thinking of the small geodes you can find in a novelty shop, essentially from underground. Many of them are cracked open already, and you see the gem-like interiors, and imagining them being, you know, tens of thousands of times larger than our own humanoid experiences. And so those images were dropped, real life locations were dropped into the Discord. So take a look at some of those pictures. And of course, you can Google some of those pictures. And yeah, we can have some fun with those things. So let's just talk about travel for right now. One thing that I think really can set your various locations in your underworld aside are how people travel, whether it's aquatically or using exotic mounts, cable cars or mine carts, those kind of things. Yeah, those are the kind of things that I think are pretty cool things to add into the game to allow you to, you know, really set one place aside from the other. Yeah, Ricker says, let's not make them as deadly as in real life, though. Yeah, some of those locations. Yeah, Rickard placed those pictures in the group in the Discord over at RPG with DBJ Discord channel, and it's pretty amazing and quite quite deadly and nerve-wracking for me. I'm not a claustrophobic individual by nature, but I could very much imagine, like, it takes a lot of courage to want to go down deep into some of these cavernous areas where it looks so fragile to be around these, you know, crystalline formations. And I'm sure I personally am framing something that I've never had an experience with, but yeah, I know that's awesome. Zevron in the chat says, travel. The thing every DM struggles to make or deliver dramatically without just divulging into a combat encounter. Yes, that we talk about that on this channel quite a bit, about the travel, the travel encounter. And I will summarize it like this. Just follow me on this. So traditionally, we really don't have a problem making a 2, 3, 4, 5 room dungeon. Long distance travel in a game, especially if you have a place in your setting, we're talking about Subterranean here, that is very treacherous and dark, and the characters need to be very careful. A 5-room simple graph dungeon is exactly the same way we should be thinking about a 5-day travel or 5-week travel or anything. If you design 5 rooms, you can have 5 separate encounters along a distance of travel, and then have those encounters happen as one would travel from one room to another. It's just separated by, you know, miles, kilometers, and such. And each location, as someone travels, may have some variations, but just as someone would travel from one room to another, our travel we should think of our travel as the exact same thing. So that's just my my very simple analysis of that. Rickard says, I think the geo chambers will kill a human in 15 minutes or some such, due to the environment that is needed for them to grow that tall. Ooh, see, I'm not familiar with how it is that geodes even spawn that way, but what a great way what a great thread to pull on in terms of whatever it is causing those crystalline formations to grow, and the speed at which they grow could very much have an impact on the people that are in existence in that world. So if it's very slow, these crystalline formations might be harvested by those that are arcane in nature. It could be thought of as something quite religious. It could be something thought of as druidic to summon some kind of elemental or break through some elemental realm or region or something. But if they grow very quickly, you could very much throw someone into it and lock them or stick them into a geode room and watch the crystals grow through their bodies pretty nastily. And I think that would be an awesome way to to trap player characters in a kind of a naturalized trap or obstacle, with crystals growing in and around them and trying to grow through them, and they have to dodge out of these extremely sharp piercing crystalline formations. I like that. As a matter of fact, you could probably reskin that as an ooze or something. You just reskin it as a crystalline growth. But I'm feeling it. I'm feeling it a lot. Zev says the 5 or 6 level dungeon is fine because players expected to raid a dungeon, fight monsters inside, dismantle traps, run away with loot. They did not expect to be stopped by wolves or bandits on the road just to make you you feel not bored. Well, yeah, that's where we need to have a discussion. I think sometimes our expectation is let's get through the boring stuff so we can get to the exciting front door of the dungeon, as opposed to saying it's a mindset. I don't believe it's any problem with the rules or players or GMs. I just think it's just changing our mindset in terms of, like, the exciting part is also the journey, as opposed to ignoring the quote unquote boring stuff to get to the next adventure, which is the next dungeon, right? Rico says, I would break down traveling to combat encounters, which may or may not be able to be circumvented. Okay. Scientific encounter, like walking by a broken statue and such, or scenic encounter, walking by a broken statue and such, and location encounters, oases, mines, etc. Yeah, and I overlay that with the idea that every encounter, of course, there's a mindset that every encounter is combat related, where technically every encounter is an encounter with something that draws the PC's attention, like you mentioned, whether it's a broken statue or an oasis or a mine, and some of those things can be hazards unto themselves. For example, many people that traveled across this vast globe have encountered many weather events. Many people that travel across this globe have come to locations where they just need to navigate through them. How do you cross a deep ravine? Well, you could go all the way around it, but if that takes too long, how do you cross the ravine? And that in itself is an encounter, figuring out how to solve a problem. And giving your PCs the opportunity to solve a problem, I think can be as much of an encounter as it is meeting a caravan on the road or fighting some ogres or something of that nature. Zev says, I just click fast forward if I cannot figure out a way to convey something dramatically. Well, it isn't it's just moving the scene. It's not a personal opinion. I mean, it is your personal opinion, but whatever. It's perfectly fine. It's just nothing wrong with that. And sure, again, there's the mindset that, well, if we're traveling, we need to role play out every 5 minutes of our travel. No, it's like us driving to work. The only things that stick out to us from our travel from home to work are those things that draw our attention, whether it's someone walking their small dog, or a new poster goes up for a new movie, or someone drives through a red light. Those are the things that stick out. And where you drive past an ice cream place like me, and you go, man, I need to stop in there after work. I keep forgetting to pick up another pint of ice cream. Those are things. Yeah. Plura says, I get a treadmill and make them really immerse themselves in a 3-day trip. Oh, you're so sarcastic. I love it. Yeah. Hey guys, step on this treadmill. Do it for real. Oh man. Oh, you're going up in a mountain? We're gonna have to tilt up the front of that treadmill. Yes, or how long the goddamn drive is. You got that right. It's funny how our mindset is uh, geared to the fact that we would prefer to move smoothly for 20 minutes rather than sit in traffic for 15. That's a real thing. I'm completely aware of it. I would rather make a 20-minute trip that moves smoothly, and I can listen to radio or a podcast or something with very little traffic rather than sit in traffic in red lights, bumper to bumper for 15 minutes. Yeah. Zev said, I give them XP if they walked on a treadmill. All right. So one of the Ricker says, I should say that the scenic and location encounters are there to give options for interplay, role play, and or skill challenges. Exactly. And one of the things I think we can use when we were talking about like subterranean travel and Underdark and that kind of thing is to give as much importance for the skill challenges, for the psychological and the intellectual challenges as we do to the combat, because sometimes it might reveal something. It might be a clue that further immerses the players into something else. For example, let's say the players come to an abandoned mine and they see stacks, 5-ton blocks of stone and granite stacked to one side and abandoned tools, and there's a large mine shaft and part of it is collapsed, and now the players can search around, and do they see in receive any kind of information about what happened or transpired here? Where are all the individuals that might be, let's say it's a dwarven mine, where are the dwarves? Would they leave their stuff here randomly? Has there been an attack? And they could gather that information for use later on, and possibly even return to the same location and use that location. You guys know me. I'm a third pillar-ist at heart, and maybe the players use this location later on for cover, or they lead their adversaries or enemies to this location and knock over one of these 5-ton boulders on top of their heads, or dump them down a mine shaft, or something of that nature. So yeah, I think it's just the mindset of us like trying to fast forward past the boring stuff because we've already made the decision it's boring before we got there, right? So yeah. Rickard says bonus XP for each of calories you've burned on that treadmill. Oh man. Although I suppose, hear me out. I suppose you could do that with at a con or something, and have the treadmill as the you're the ranger, you have to walk on the treadmill to solve this problem or something. So it says, I feel when you're in the Underdark with the location being so foreboding and resource draining, we are going to run those random encounters. Exactly. And we mentioned this the other day. I think it behooves us not to do this for our subterranean world building today, that if we make like some random encounters, like we really curtail our random encounters to really encapsulate the various regions of our subterranean realm. And remember, we can think in 3 dimensions. So you could have a gnomish village, subterranean village over top of a, I don't know, troglodyte haven, which is also over top of and to the east of a deep dwarven hold, which happens to all be over top of a drow empire, right? We can stack cities and empires and rough terrain and switchback caverns and tight spaces and flooded locations all on top of each other, as well as spreading them out. And then our random encounter tables, we can create them so that they are representative of where the players are at. Oh, if they travel towards our subterranean realm, towards the volcanic regions, there's volcanic veins and poisonous gases, and they're going to encounter certain things in one direction, as opposed to maybe there's a place where we have those growing crystals and religious travelers that worship the elemental spirits of earth or something of that nature. So yeah, definitely random encounters. I love random encounter tables, but designing them to encapsulate what it is that we wish to have in our realms is also possible. I think some people think of random encounters tables as not having anything to do with their own setting. It's like, no, you're supposed to change that to make it fit into your setting. And encounters, of course, don't necessarily need to be combat. They could just be, I mentioned before about a swarm of beetles just swarming over the PCs heading in a particular direction. They don't necessarily have to combat the players. They could just be heading in one direction. PCs might just be able to avoid it by, ducking their heads or sliding against the wall or letting them crawl over their bodies as they go upon their way. And maybe they're running, maybe they're trying to get a new hive, maybe there's a cave-in that happened many kilometers away in a distance that the PCs didn't feel or whatever. Pillar-ist says, I don't think I've had a combat in my last 4 sessions, something like that. There were environmental hazards, but no actual fighting in the traditional sense. And of course, the tenor and speed and of each game is going to definitely be different. I think one mistake that we make as DMs and as players is to expect certain things in certain game sessions as if we must have X number of combats and X number of die rolls. And, we have to have at least one conversation. No, it's whatever is organic. I've been in games where we've played 3, 4, 5 sessions and it's all been talking. And I've been in other ones where it felt like war. Every game session was, okay, we get back to rolling initiative and we're in another fight again. I mean, so that's just the tenor of the game. And if as long as it feels good, it is good. Zev says every possibility of getting caught by illithids or drow or darrow or whatever else abomination is below there adds to the fun. Well, heck yeah! You turn up once you turn up the tension of finding certain things, especially if you drop little hints, old poison darts left by the drow or markings on the wall left by like the darrow or the deep gnomes. I'm not gonna pronounce it. Deep gnomes or the dark dwarves or what have you. If you leave little bits and pieces of evidence that the world exists beyond the player characters, we sometimes an encounter is designed where almost like an old video game where the creatures are just sitting there waiting for the PCs to arrive, as opposed to things like you find someone that's injured, you find you find some animals eating another animal, you find like having things happen in the midst of something else. The PCs stumble upon some kind of lizard creature that has its forearm ripped off by something else, or that it was trapped in a cave-in or something. I mean, those are things. Undo says fitness and fiends. Oh man. I'd like to roll up my CrossFit character, please. Oh, you guys are crazy. Zev says, unless you're using American scientists, they'll use some BS archaic unit of measurement like pounds. Of course. Yeah, the metric system hasn't quite taken over because we're stubborn, and we're like dwarves. We're stubborn like that. Zev says, murder hoboism, the origins of D&D. Absolutely. Plura says they did cut off someone's arm and sell it to someone, but the donor was already dead. It was just recycling. Oh, you're so wrong. There's talk about getting trapped and having someone's arm cut off. There's a movie based on a real life event called 127 Hours, where a gentleman was traveling over a barren, rocky landscape and fell and got his arm trapped in the rock and was subject to like dehydration and a little bit of madness and the threat of there being a flood while he was trapped down in one of these crevices and such. And that kind of encounter real life encounter. This gentleman that literally had to take a pocket knife and cut his own arm off. It's something I think would behoove us not to include. Like, we should include something like that in our role playing games to add to that. Especially down in the subterranean realm. Zev says, I always found it odd that Drow and Darrow and Dwargar are dark skinned. True. I've often wondered that as well, but I mean, of course, we just accept it, right? It's not, none of this is scientifically plausible, but why not change it for your location, right? Your realm, your world, and make albinos with, shockingly pink eyes, or make them blind or have no eyes at all, like we talked about on Monster Monday, changing their primary senses and organs and such. Why not have completely hairless bugbears down in the deep dungeons or whatnot, and then maybe even add some other things, to add some bat wings to some people, or some lizard skin, or make them like moles, or groundhogs or something like that. Like, give them a feral appearance, a tunneling ability or something. Go for it. I absolutely agree with that. Pelor says, anyway, food for subterranean societies. Mushrooms are cheating. Well, I talked about tubers, radishes, yams, potatoes, sweet potatoes that are gathered from ceilings, pulled down out of the ceilings and such. I think that's kind of silly, but yeah. Oh man. Bruce Lombardo, I love your content, DBJ. Here's a change for a bit of caffeine for you. Yeah. Why, thank you. These daily talks for about an hour, we go over a little bit, but these Monday through Friday thing, oh, dude. Coffee buddy, thank you so much. Thank you very much for the super chat, man. I really appreciate it. Although I will admit that the caffeine itself is us having these silly, funny, great conversations and such, and we love throwing ourselves some emoji, some coffee emojis up front, right, Fat Ninja? So Bruce, thank you very much for that. I honestly, I do really appreciate that. You didn't have to, so I'm really grateful for you. By the way, if you feel the need, please do throw something in the chat, like a subject you want to talk about, or something you were thinking about, or whatever. I'm really appreciative of that as well. Zev says, I mean, I know Gary Gygax was a Mormon, and they believed evil individuals have dark skin. Did he? I don't know if he. Yeah, I mean, you know what? There were some problematic things when it comes to like the Cthulhu and Conan writers and things like that. I don't believe you me. I'm quite aware of that. And the idea of like the darker skin is evil. It's a problematic trope, but I think it's at such a level now that I don't believe anyone is conscious of it any longer, to the point that I don't think anyone. I'm positive enough to know that I think people don't really care about it. It's just it exists, so it's a historical thing, and we've moved past it. So I'm pretty confident in. I like humanity, so I think that. But I do feel you, Zeb. Sometimes I scratch my head and look at things and go like, I can't believe we never questioned that before. That thing, whatever that thing is, right? But yeah, Pelor's like, ooh, humanity, ugh. Ah. Humans, oh man, they're the worst. Yeah, if it wasn't for being human, they'd suck, right? Oh man. Says, I mean, Drow didn't have lore beyond being ebony black evil elves underground. Well, you know what? I think we all have our problems with elves in the general sense of like, there's always a better elf, but there's not very many better other races that dwell under the ground or above the earth and all that kind of stuff. But getting back, squirrel. Getting back to our subterranean world building, I think the travel portion of it, in terms, especially traveling long distances, is one of the things. Sometimes we do have a hard time um, in creating engaging travel, but I think just the ability of our societies to travel in the first place in a location where a straight line is extremely difficult to find uh, is something that we should really think about and have some fun with. So, for example, having ourselves like underwater rivers and such, or underwater tubes where maybe a uh, maybe a boat can't travel down these underwater realms, but maybe portions of the river are completely submerged and they could flow at like high rates of speed to allow travel commerce from one subterranean realm to another. Now, you could add in some river rapids and maybe some waterfalls and some trapped aquifers. Like, for example, you could have an underground lake that has a waterfall at the end of it that spills into yet another underground lake or something. Now, I'm sure that's only one direction. How you go back up the other direction, I don't know if you go back upstream, but that would be kind of cool to have. Maybe the dwarves have lift their under realm boats up waterfalls to yet another under subterranean lake or something. Coming off the top of my head, that's about all I can think of. Tolkien elves. Bruce Lombardo says, I run Frog God Games materials, and last night in our Discord, the authors let us know some history about how the elves betrayed everyone 1,000 or so years ago. Explains why the mountain dwarves hate us. You know what? Talking about uh, elves and age and such, we often don't include the disparity between how long lived one race is with another one. And so if you had a long lived race like elves, they could, do something quite heinous and then just outlive the victims that suffered from their crimes. Any long lived race could do that compared to a race that somehow next to them is much shorter. And so you very well could have let's say like a subterranean community where the drow or whatever other race that you have down there that's extremely long lived may have been banished or set themselves aside, or they understand that they did some kind of harm or being hunted. And fast forward to today, 4, 5, 6, 10 generations later of humanity, we don't remember any of those things happening, but that race absolutely remembers what they did. And it could be that they're waiting out the idea that this information has disappeared. Maybe they've been sending agents for years and years and years to try to erase this information. And so there could be a race to time, like a race against time, to ensure that yet one more temple that held this information is destroyed. So I think you could kind of play with a race against time kind of thing for that, especially if some members of that ancient community still feel guilty about it, while the other ones are like, look, you need to keep your mouth shut. Like, hey, the council might gather themselves and like, listen, we need to send some agents after Joe, because Joe left and he's about to tell everybody what we did. So you're going to need to kill this person, i.e., there's your plot hook, right? Zed says, given how big drow society is, I made them very community based in my world, sharing mothers to raise young, being very emotional and prone to outbursts. A drow would hit another, they have a problem with it, and then they deal with it and apologize. That sounds like a whole society based on like psychological and physical abuse. Uh, I'm liking that. Okay, I don't actually like that, but I'm liking that as a storytelling element. Like, that's pretty nasty and terrible and sick, and I love it. I love it so much that that they are in the past, they were always marked as chaotic evil, and some people had a problem with that. But I believe that you can have a chaotic evil society because each individual is chaotic. They just expect everyone else to get in line, and so yeah, this kind of weird and psychologically incestuous community. I like that a lot. Plura says. Bruce says the details will be in the campaign setting book coming out. Really? I did not know that. Oh. Yeah, Frog God Games makes some really excellent materials. I have not personally, I don't personally own any of the materials, but I've read some and I've played in some. So yeah, that is its own thing, man. So absolutely, Bruce. Pelora says living for a stupidly long time gives some interesting architecture ideas for subterranean societies. It becomes feasible to make stalactite and stalagmite pillars as part of your construction. Ooh. I like that. I like that a lot. You could build / grow them because they're kind of, if I'm not mistaken, it's stone that also has that I'm going to be very generalized with this. It's stone that drips from moisture to drip from the ceiling, so it drips down like a cone, a point, and then that moisture drips down on the ground, which then starts to build up because of its mixture with the minerals. So it builds up from the bottom. So you get this like geological icicle effect and geological, I don't know, building snowman at the bottom. I get that's the wrong way to say it, but yeah, you could definitely, I could see elves and dwarves building these communities through natural means, and especially once you start adding in some arcane elements to it. Oh yeah, they could build themselves some roof, ceiling based, like, I was about to say castles, but I'm not sure exactly what kind of havens you would call them. You could make them quite huge, I guess, for architectural reasons. That would be awesome. And then doing it laterally, you can make bridges and spans across extremely large gaps in the earth and such. I like that. I like that a lot. Zev says the people are usually like normal society, but aren't raised to lie and turn the other cheek. You get frustrated with someone, then you let them know and deal with it fast. And he says it's not incestuous. Mothers just take. I didn't mean that. I didn't mean that physically incestuous. I meant psychologically, in terms of having an inappropriate emotional connection to people in an inappropriate manner. I didn't mean that physically, but yes. Mothers take turns raising the young, or your neighbor is essentially your aunt or mom when birth making is busy. When birth mother is busy training, military, or hunting. Yeah, Ricker says, to be fair, you could have a stalagmite that reaches from top to bottom of the cave and have it be hollowed out as a form of tower. Absolutely. And the ones that do not connect, you could have royal families live above, who the poorer people live in the stalagmites that are below the ground, and then the royals could live above in these hollowed out cities where you could see like light coming through, like the hollowed out windows and balconies, especially if they have maybe some kind of aerial mounts, maybe bat-like or insectoid. You could put some feathered aerial mounts underground if you want to, but I like the idea of something maybe insect or bat-like, and maybe some arcane floating instruments or cable cars or elevator systems or cranes that lift people from the bottom to the top. And then of course you have yourselves your giant towers, right? They could both be havens and support systems for these vast caverns underneath the earth. I would even imagine an arcane haven of those growing crystals that we mentioned before, where a small cadre of travelers could take these small crystals, something no larger than something they could carry in a backpack or a wagon of some sort, or on a pack animal like one of those blind albino lizards, and then they just set it to grow, and they carve it and grow it and prod it to become yet another vast city or something. So yeah, I could see that as well, especially if they live very long time. Zev says long-lived societies are interesting to think of because humans being short-lived lead to us making upgrade after upgrade in terms of architecture to help aid in survival and resource management. Elves and dwarves living so long can lead to stagnation. And that's a great way for us to like layer our architecture. So PCs come along to a location. They see that there's been major cave-in. Maybe there's an abandoned city. Some of the architecture has fallen in on itself. Maybe one of the dwarves in the party is like, looking around and like, yeah, whoever built this city should have never built it here because I can feel the fault lines just from just from my bare hands. I can feel the fault lines. And the humans might be like, oh, so when did it collapse? And you're like, well, 300 years ago. And the humans like, well, I could have lived here, lived and died here, had a family, and they could have lived and died. It would have been no problem. But for the dwarf, it's like a cave that's going to collapse in 300 years is not stable. But for a human being, it's not a big deal, right? It's the joke of the dwarf that sold a pickaxe to the human and laughed to his friends, and the dwarf's like, what happened? He's like, I took that human for all he's got. I sold him a pickaxe. It's only going to last 500 years, right? It's based on perception of what's going on. Zev says, oh my God, imagine bat griffins, lion bodies with bat wings and faces, slurping blood from their prey. Ooh, I like that. Ooh, bat griffins, right? Hanging, as a matter of fact, the bat griffins might hang upside down from the ceilings where they normally hang out at, with their bat wings like covering their faces, their heads like tucked under their armpits until they're needed by their riders. And maybe the riders wear a whistle around their neck or able to naturally whistle to alert them, because maybe they don't navigate by sight, their eyes being like milkied over, and maybe they're completely blind, or it's very hard for them to see. Maybe they're like pink-eyed or something, even though bats actually can see. But maybe they just it's echolocation, it's sonar, it's the whatever the case may be. You guys know what I'm talking about. And maybe they have like half albino, half black flanks or something to them. That'd be kind of cool. You could even I could even imagine. Zev's bring up blind sight. Oh, Zev, sorry. You know what? I'm going to pick with you slightly, just because on Monday we talked about all the different variations of non-humanoid or humanistic sight and sensory things. We talked about not just blind sight and not just dark vision, but permutations of it, right? So no, you're fine, Zeb. I'm picking with you because we talked about everything from how we could modify blind sight, psychic awareness, echolocation, sonar, thermal vision, the differences in other Deadman brought up the differences between dark vision, which is like grayscale, black and white, versus night vision at one point, which was color. You could actually see color in the dark. And we even talked about, the Plura says, you don't even see deaf hearing, right? Yeah, exactly. We don't hear about, there are human beings that have even trained / evolved themselves, blind individuals who are able to operate like bats, where they send out a sound by making clicking noises or tapping, like kind of how a blind person can make a tapping noise, and they can sense the vibration of how long it takes that sound to reach them back to navigate in their world. And deaf hearing, that's funny. But yeah, I mean, and we as the progenitors of these settings can have some fun with our player characters. For example, I keep picking with the blind lizard folk, But if they're blind lizard folk using a heightened sense of smell, then what kind of illusions can you use on them? Well, maybe visual illusions are perfectly useless. Even for a bat, maybe bats, you put up an illusionary brick wall and you're just like, whatever, and they fly right through it. Whereas an illusionary sound or a distracting sound or something might distract them greatly and cause them to flee, like a thunderwave spell, or throwing your voice using some kind of ventriloquism or something, or just carrying the dwarven culture that carries around with them whistles or shaker sticks or some other kind of thrumming device or what have you, or drums or something that are able to distract some of the creatures. Now, other ways to get around in the deep, dark subterranean realms are your classic like mine carts, maybe even mine cart trains, maybe pulled by pack animals, very large pack animals or something. You could have burrowing worms or some other kind of burrowing creature that's being poked and prodded for good, or maybe they're very domesticated and trained very well, and you could have a community travel behind these creatures that are tunneling through the earth. Zeb says, bat griffins may tear apart their prey and slurp the blood from the ground, causing more morale checks for scaring the hell out of enemies. Yeah, well, why the hell not? Maybe that's a thing. I mean, your bat griffins, you could reskin harpies, the lady-faced nasty bird creatures. Just reskin them as bat creatures and have them hanging from the ceilings. They do the same thing. I mean, the art of reskin, I think, is something that's not played up quite a bit, because frankly, it means that you sell less books and you sell less stuff. But the art of the reskin is something that's like a DM's tool. Like, if you had a toolbox, that's one of the tools that sits right there, always used. I mean, hell, what's Zev saying this? I've seen giant spiders used for pack animals and travel, fast crawling, climbing, webbing to reinforce things. Absolutely. Hell, I would love a giant spider mounted chase in my subterranean world. And let's not limit ourselves with spiders. Spiders are great. Spiders are patient. They have, like you said, they have the webbing. They hang upside down. You could have special mounts, not mounts, special saddles. What? Geez. Special saddles for PCs to and PCs and NPCs to ride on them. A great chance to start using the animal handling skill, even on spiders, especially. Plur says, I don't want a giant spider anything, to be honest. Yeah, but again, using those nature skills, those survival skills, those animal handling checks, especially subterranean people were just like, what's a horse? What horses? Camels? I don't know what that is. But spiders, man, spiders are good boys and girls. Spiders are great. And again, here we go. Let's take some real world spiders, right? Trapdoor spiders, wolf spiders, black widow spiders, and let's take some of them, turn that volume up, make them giant size. And each of those spiders could be raised and grown by different cultures in the subterranean realm, including maybe a collection of giant spiders that have given birth to small spiders. So maybe on their back, there's like the spider web that's holding all of the incubating insects that might be released into the wild and such. So a giant spider could also have with it a swarm of other spiders around it. Again, a very easy BFF combination, as well as giant spider webs holding plenty of food, new or otherwise, being held in the web that maybe PCs could release. I could imagine petrified spider webs so that a community lives in and amongst spider webs, where they have hanging places to live that are hanging off of the spider webs. Zev says the fish catcher spiders that live in the few underground bodies of water that wait for humanoids and other larger prey to near for a drink, then pop out and restrain them in webbing, paralyzing poison to drown targets. Of course, if I'm not mistaken, isn't there a spider that lives underwater by capturing air bubbles and putting a spider web around it? Please, I know there's a spider that does something like, maybe it's not a spider itself, but there's an insect that does that. I could be mistaken that it's not an arachnid, but doesn't matter. But you get the point. There could even be a spider that casts a web across. Is that the fish catcher that you're talking about? Yeah. He's like, yeah, like I said. Zev's over there like fist pounding, like, yo, DBJ, I just said that. I'm picking what you do. But yeah, I'm sure these giant spiders might capture fish like we make nets that you put across a river. I could imagine a giant web doing the exact same thing. Pillar-ist like, see, they're not good. This sort of nonsense isn't fair. If I started poisoning people, there'd be outrage. But okay, so let's flow away from our spiders. And what are some other domesticated subterranean animals we can talk about? Well, we do have the rest of the insect world: centipedes, centipede millipedes, worms. I know they're not insects, but flies, wasps. There are some other insects that make hives underground as well. Ants, giant ants, of course. Pillar says, really tiny wolves to go with your giant spiders. Well, you could have some kind of a feline or lupine things under in the underworld. You could make them like kind of naked, almost rat-like in their appearance. Rick says wolf spiders, of course. Wolf-headed spiders, yeah. Which sounds kind of nasty, and I like it. I like it a lot. But yeah, you could Zev says giant moles that make the tunnels that drow travel through without aid of druids. Oh yeah, absolutely. There could be members of each group, like your drow or your dwarves and other humanoids that live underground. Our blind albino lizard men that we keep picking on a little bit here. Your naked bugbears and whatnot, that are using them as not just pack animals, but tunneling animals as well. And they may also have a secondary ability, maybe to sense sources of water or mineral deposits, or maybe they instinctively know safe travel paths, even though, for example, a scout could say, hey, the next 3 kilometers is pretty clear for us, but maybe the insects or other domesticated animals instinctively know, no, it's not safe at all. We need to go around. So yeah. But Pillar says beetles. There's a video game with beetles as traveling mounts underground. Of course. Ricker says, or well, giant wolf spiders. They already are CR 1/4 monsters in 5e. It seems kind of low. And giant scorpions. Now, I want to bring up something else that I think sometimes we as DMs are, because we're getting towards the hour mark, sometimes we get a little bit afraid of doing something of this nature, which is handing things over to our players that we think they're going to abuse in our world. So for example, let's say the players come to a confluence of area in the subterranean realm, which is the equivalent of a major metropolitan city, right? There's all kinds of people, free folk that live in and around and underground. And for whatever reason, you want to have the players pick a mount for them to ride on, delving deeper into your subterranean world, right? So they get to pick like either a giant scorpion or a giant spider or a giant centipede or a giant wasp or any of these other, a giant beetle or a worm or any number of other types of mounted creatures. And you want to give these to your players because you think it would be cool. But maybe you're hesitant because you're thinking, well, this is going to give them too much. Here's the real issue with Zev, you're so wrong. Zev says, don't trust your players with anything at all. Even setting info. Tell them they're playing Into the Abyss and run the Game of Thrones tabletop RPG. Oh, you're so wrong. If you can't be right, gotta be wrong. No, but here's the deal. It's never the issue isn't whether a player has something that they're going to abuse. It's usually the dichotomy between someone having something and the rest of the world not having it at all. So if mounts in your Subterranean world are very common, then it's not a big deal if a player is riding on the back of a giant scorpion, because they're probably going to meet, I don't know, dozens, if not hundreds of other people riding on the back of giant scorpions. So it's the argument of the flying ability of the Aarakocra, right? Everyone's like, oh, it's OP, it's too powerful, as if they're the only flying thing in the world, right? And if they are, yeah, it is too powerful for a first level creature. But if your world has at least one Aarakocra, there's probably more than one, and so on and so forth. So it's really just a matter of, hey, in my setting, finding a Subterranean mount is no big deal. Toss them a little bit of gold or whatever barter system, or maybe they stole it or whatever. And hey, in my world, I want them to travel to these far reaches. This is the best way for my PCs to get there. And yes, will they encounter other people riding on similar things? Yeah, of course. So it kind of is a wash. It's not a big deal. Pelor says, if you make them run enough, they don't play up so much. Yeah. Zev says, well, that's why crossbows are cheap in my world. Exactly. I know you're talking about popping that flying character out of the sky. Right. Exactly. I mean, it makes little sense. Whatever. So, guys, I'd like to thank everyone for joining me for today's World Building Wednesday and at RPG with DBJ. Now, just to let you guys know yet again that this Monday through Friday we'll still be going live. We'll still be doing the same chats and all that kind of business. But this is also being broadcast on an audio voice channel over at Fantasy Grounds College. So if any of you are talking about the Scorpion Mountain, like, yeah, don't lean back. Oh man, you better be very trustworthy. Unless the stinger's like hanging over your head, which I guess doesn't make you any more comfortable. Yeah, definitely riding on the back of something, the sword of Damocles kind of thing. Yeah. Oh, Zev, your Egypt, Egyptological setting. Yeah. Siren. But guys, just to let you know, if you prefer to only to have an audio version of this show going live, and maybe you're having some troubles, or maybe there's some buffering issues, or maybe I'm just audio wise, maybe I'm just a little more clear, please go over to join the Discord over at Fantasy Grounds College and join there, and you can just pop on in, listen to the show, have yourselves a good old time doing that. Now, also, I will let you know that because I have partnered with Fantasy Grounds College, and they invited me in to do what I do as I normally do, I will be interacting with people over there. So I'm going to understand that going forward, there may be times where I will not be able to get to each and every and all comments, especially simply from the fact that we do get distracted quite a bit, and we'll have to put like a kind of a kibosh to that. So slowly and surely, I will be asking people, especially if they want to specifically point something out to me, just put DBJ in front of the comment and moving forward. So yeah, so guys, thank you very much. I want to thank the people, the administrators over at Fantasy Grounds College, for having me there. I hope I'm not ruining the place by showing up and ruining the party. So guys, everyone, Thank you so much. Says, I personally think scorpion riders are cool, but in my setting, it's wrong. Pelora, everyone, thank you so much. Zev, thank you for popping on in. Thank you for you guys for being loyal. I want to again thank Mr. Bruce Lombardo for the super chat. I really appreciate that. Going to get I don't know about the cup of coffee, but I will be drinking my flavorful. It's maybe it's too bright there. Uh, Almond milk. I want them to become a sponsor of the show. I drink it so much. But anyway, guys, thank you so much for joining me. Tomorrow is Third Pillar Thursday, and those who have zero idea what the hell that means, join in tomorrow, and you'll see. We're gonna have some fun with that, guys. Everybody, have a great one. For the next 5 to 10 minutes, I will be in the voice Discord over at Fantasy Grounds College before I leave. So guys, have a great one. See ya. Bye. Boom, boom, boom.